The air on proving ground 7 shimmered, a visible curtain of heat drawn across the ochre plains. From their perch on a crystalline rock outcrop that fractured the binary sunlight into 1,000 dazzling shards, Kalen and Verex watched their sector. Below them, the carcass of a bull crage beast lay cooling, its thick hide pierced in a single, perfect location behind the primary respiratory spiracle. The kill had been swift, a blur of Xylan power and precision. A glorious strike. Kalen stretched, his 4 powerful limbs extending with feline grace. The obsidian chitin plating that covered his back and shoulders glinted, a stark contrast to the pale, sinewy muscle of his underbelly. He retracted the killing claws on his forelimbs with a satisfying click. "A textbook hunt, Elder," Kalen purred, his voice a low thrum of resonant frequencies. "The beast never registered our presence until my claws found its life thread. A clean end. Honorable." Verex, whose own chitin was the color of weathered stone and etched with the scars of 100 such hunts, merely inclined his elongated head. His gaze, multifaceted and sharp, remained fixed on the plains. "Honor is in the efficiency, young one. The respect is in the swiftness. Wasted energy is an insult to the spirit of the hunt." He was the epitome of the Xylan ideal, an ambush predator evolved to perfection. Their entire physiology was built for explosive, overwhelming force delivered in a single, decisive moment. They could outpace any creature on their homeworld over a short distance, their muscles contracting like living pistons. After the burst, however, came the recovery, a period of enforced stillness as their unique metabolism reset. To hunt any other way was not only inefficient, it was considered fundamentally wrong, a sign of weakness. And what do you make of that? Kalen gestured with his chin towards a small, bipedal figure moving slowly but deliberately across the valley floor. It was the human, one of the soft-skinned, slow-moving species the Galactic Compact had insisted be included in this cycle's apex trials. The decision had been a source of great amusement and consternation among the other predator species. The human, whose designation was Elias, was walking. Not jogging, not stalking, not sprinting, just walking. His gait was steady, a rhythmic plodding that seemed utterly disconnected from the urgent business of survival. His target, a glide hoof, was already a shimmering speck in the distance, easily 1,000 paces ahead. The creature, a 6-legged herbivore known for its incredible bursts of speed and skittish nature, had spotted the human and bolted. "I make it a failure," Kalen scoffed. "Look at it. No natural armor, no claws to speak of. Its dentition is pitifully blunt. It moves with the urgency of a grazing ruminant. It even carries its water on its back, as if acknowledging it cannot possibly catch its prey before thirst claims it. Why are they even here, Verex?" Verex did not answer immediately. He watched the human, his analytical mind processing the data. The creature was indeed slow. Its movements lacked the coiled potential of a true predator. Yet it was still moving. The glide hoof had sprinted, a magnificent display of panicked acceleration, and was now slowing to a trot, confident in the distance it had created. The human, however, had not altered his pace. Not by a fraction of a degree. "They are persistence hunters, the Codex claims," Verex finally rumbled, the words sounding alien even to him. "A methodology considered archaic." "Archaic. It is non-existent." Kalen flicked a wrist spur in irritation. "The prey is gone. The hunt is over. He is simply on a long, pointless walk. He will collapse from heat exposure long before he gets close again. Our suns are not kind to the unarmored." "He is sweating," Verex noted, a new thread of information weaving itself into his analysis. "The moisture darkens his tunic. His skin glistens with it. It is an active cooling system. The glide hoof cools by panting, a far less efficient method that requires it to stop moving." "Minor biological curiosity," Kalen dismissed. "It will not make his legs move faster." They watched for another hour as the suns crawled across the sky. The glide hoof, seeing no immediate threat, stopped to graze on some tough, fibrous scrub. The human continued his relentless walk. The distance between them shrank not quickly but undeniably. The glide hoof, startled, looked up, saw the approaching figure, and bolted once more. Another spectacular burst of speed, another cloud of dust, another period of confident grazing. And still the human came on. Same pace. Same rhythm. Left, right, left, right. a living metronome marking a tempo only it seemed to understand. By the time the twin suns began their descent, casting long, distorted shadows across the plains, the glide hoof had sprinted 5 times. The human had not stopped walking once. He was now closer than he had been at the start of the day. "He will stop for the night cycle," Kalen stated, though a sliver of uncertainty had crept into his voice. "No creature hunts in the open through the dark phases. It is madness." They maintained their vigil from the cool heights of the outcrop. The moons of proving ground 7 rows, bathing the landscape in a pale, ethereal light. The human did not stop. He produced a small illumination device and continued his walk, a tiny firefly of purpose in the vast, sleeping darkness. The glide hoof, unnerved by the persistent light, moved restlessly through the night, unable to achieve the deep sleep it needed to recover its strength. The second day dawned, hot and bright. Kalen and Verex, having rested and fed on their own kill, took to their light skimmer, a silent craft that allowed them to observe from above. They found the hunter and prey easily. The scene was an unsettling echo of the day before. The glide hoof, its eyes wide with the first real inklings of anxiety, looked haggard. It was still faster, still capable of creating immense distance. But each sprint was shorter now. Each rest was more frantic. The human Elias looked the same. He was dusty, his face grim with focus, but his pace was identical. It was the same unwavering, monotonous rhythm. He stopped only to raise a tube to his lips and drink from the bladder on his back. A brief, mechanical action, and then the walk resumed. "This is illogical," Kalen transmitted over their private comms, his voice tight. "The prey is clearly faster. It should be able to escape to another territory, lose him in the canyons to the north. Why does it not simply run until it can no longer see him?" "Because its instincts are failing it," Verex replied, his own mind grappling with the bizarre spectacle. "The glide hoof's entire survival strategy is predicated on a short, explosive burst of speed to escape an immediate threat. It expects the predator to give up if the initial ambush fails. It runs, it sees the threat is gone, it rests. But the threat is never gone, the human is always there, on the horizon, a patient, inexorable fact. The energy expenditure, it must be immense. Kalen, his stride is efficient. His arms swing in perfect counterbalance. His breathing, even from this distance, appears steady. He is not wasting a single joule of energy on anything other than forward motion. Now look at the prey." Glide hoof was a portrait of inefficiency. It would jerk its head up constantly, wasting energy on vigilance. It would bound away in a panic, using far more power than necessary. It would circle back on its own trail, confused. It was burning through its reserves in panicked, wasteful bursts. The human was spending his like a miser, one precious coin at a time. On the third day, the psychological toll on the glide hoof became physically manifest. Patches of foam flecked its muzzle. Its powerful leg muscles, designed for sprinting, not endurance, trembled even at rest. The heat of the twin suns was beating down, and its panting was now a constant, ragged sound that carried on the wind. It could no longer cool itself effectively. It was beginning to overheat. The human, by contrast, seemed to have become one with the heat. His skin, exposed on his arms and face, was slick with a continuous sheen of sweat that evaporated in the dry air, carrying the heat away with it. He paused under the shade of a skeletal-looking tree, poured a small amount of his precious water over his head, and then resumed the walk. The pace did not slacken. It did not increase. It was a constant. "He is cooking it alive inside its own skin," Verex murmured, the realization dawning on him with a cold, intellectual horror. "His biology is the weapon. The walking, the sweating, this is the killing stroke, delivered over days instead of seconds." Kalen felt a tremor in his own limbs, a sympathetic vibration of disgust, and an emotion he could not name. It was not fear, not yet. It was a profound sense of wrongness. A hunt was a glorious clash of power and speed, a dance between hunter and hunted, ending in a decisive, violent crescendo. This was not a dance. This was a siege. A slow, grinding erosion of life. "It is dishonorable," Kalen finally spat. "There is no glory in this. He is torturing the beast." "Is he?" Verex countered, his multifaceted eyes narrowed in thought. "Or is he simply applying a pressure that the beast's body cannot withstand? He has not touched it. He has not laid a claw on it. He is simply present. Is it torture to exist in a state that your prey cannot endure? We Xylans shock the system into shutdown with a single, massive trauma. The human is applying a million infinitesimal traumas, patiently waiting for the system to collapse under its own weight. They watched as the glide hoof stumbled, its foreleg buckling. It let out a cry of pain and terror, scrambling back to its 6 feet and launching into another panicked, wobbling sprint. The human did not react. He did not quicken his pace to take advantage of the weakness. He just kept walking. The dispassionate nature of the act was becoming more terrifying than any display of aggression could ever be. It was as if the human's victory was so certain that he felt no need to hurry it along. The fourth day was a blur of heat and dust, and the ever-shrinking distance between the two figures. The glide hoof's world had compressed to a single, terrifying reality, the bipedal shape that was always there. It no longer ran far. It would manage a few hundred paces, a stumbling, desperate flight, before collapsing into a quivering heap, its breath coming in shuddering, agonized gasps. Its terror had burned out, replaced by a dull, hopeless exhaustion. The human Elias was now a portrait of controlled suffering. His face was a mask of sun-baked dust and dried sweat. His eyes, visible through their observation optics, were sunk deep into their sockets, but they were not frantic or wild. They were clear, focused. They held an ancient, patient light. He was in pain. His gait, though steady, now had a subtle stiffness to it. His body was screaming for rest, but his mind was utterly, terrifyingly in control. He was a ghost haunting the glide hoof's final hours, and the suns themselves seemed to be his accomplices. He must be feeling the strain, Kalen insisted, more to convince himself than Verex. No creature can sustain this. He is flesh and blood. He is, Verex agreed. But I am beginning to believe that the strength of his species is not in the flesh, but in the will that commands it. We Xylans obey the commands of our bodies. When our muscles burn after a strike, we are forced to rest. It is a biological imperative. I suspect his mind is capable of simply overriding the imperative. He has decided on a course of action, and his body is now nothing more than a vehicle to see it through, no matter the cost. This concept was so alien to the Xylan psyche that Kalen could barely process it. To defy the needs of the body was to invite collapse, to dishonor the physical gifts you were given. To them, the mind and body were a seamless union of purpose. The human seemed to treat his body as a tool, a recalcitrant machine to be pushed and punished until it obeyed. On the 5th day, the glide hoof could no longer run. It could only manage a pathetic, stumbling walk. The human was now only a few hundred paces behind it. He had finally closed the distance, yet he did not charge. He did not break into a run to finish it. He continued to walk. The same pace, the same rhythm. It was the most terrifying thing Kalen had ever witnessed. The chase was functionally over, the prey defeated, but the process continued. The human was not adapting to the situation. He was forcing the situation to conform to his own inexorable rhythm. The glide hoof would look back, its large, liquid eyes filled with a terror so profound it was almost sublime. It saw not a predator rushing in for the kill, but death itself, walking calmly to its appointment. "Why?" Kalen whispered, his own voice hoarse. "Why does he not end it now? It is cruel." "It is not about cruelty," Verex said, his voice low and somber. He was beginning to understand, and the understanding chilled him to his core. "It is about certainty. The process is not complete. The prey has not collapsed. The conditions for the kill, as defined by his method, have not yet been met. So he walks." They watched, mesmerized by the slow-motion horror as the sun set on the 5th day. The human walked. Through the night his small light bobbed, a single, unwavering point of focus in the darkness, trailing the staggering, dying animal. The dawn of the 6th day broke clear and brutal. The glide hoof stood on a small, dusty rise, its legs splayed, its head hanging so low its muzzle touched the ground. It was alive, but only just. Its muscles had been cooked by lactic acid and heat, its organs were failing, its mind was shattered by 5 days of relentless, inescapable psychological pressure. The human walked up the rise. Left, right, left, right. The sound of his boots on the gravel was the only sound in the vast, hot silence. He stopped a few feet from the glide hoof. The animal was too broken to even flinch. It simply stood, trembling, waiting. For a long moment the human did nothing but breathe, deep, controlled breaths. His chest rose and fell. He was assessing, observing. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached for the water tube and drank. It was a long, deep draft. He was replenishing the fuel spent, tending to the machine. The glide hoof, as if this simple act were the final signal it had been waiting for, let out a soft, sighing groan. Its legs, which had held it for so long, finally gave way. It collapsed onto its side in a heap of dusty hide and shuddering limbs. It did not try to rise. It merely lay there, its race finally run. The hunt was over. The human watched it fall. There was no cry of triumph, no roar of victory, no posturing. His face remained a mask of calm, weary focus. He walked to the fallen creature, knelt beside its head, and drew a simple, practical knife from a sheath on his belt. The blade was not ornate. It was a tool. With one practiced, efficient movement, he severed the main artery in the Glyhoof's neck. There was a brief, final gush of dark blood, a last shudder, and then stillness. Kalen felt his own breath catch. He had witnessed thousands of kills. He had performed hundreds himself. They were moments of high energy, of violent and glorious finality. This was quiet. It was methodical. It was work. The human did not even admire his kill. He immediately stood up, turned his back on the massive carcass, and walked a few paces away. He sat down, his back against a small rock. He pulled a small, metallic object from a pouch and a stylus. Kalen zoomed the skimmer's optics. The human drew a single, straight line on the surface of his forearm with a dark marker. A tally. Just another number in a sequence. Then he closed his eyes. Not in sleep, but in what appeared to be a state of deep internal focus. He remained that way for several minutes, his breathing evening out, his posture relaxing fractionally. He was resetting his own system, bringing himself down from a state of exertion that should have killed him days ago. A profound silence descended upon the skimmer's cockpit. Kalen stared at the screen, at the small, soft-skinned creature resting calmly beside the 600-kilogram beast it had just killed. Not with strength or speed, but with sheer, unimaginable will. The sheer wrongness of it all coalesced into a single, terrifying thought. The Xylans, the Cathar raptors, the Chuk hunters, they all defined themselves by their predatory prowess. Their speed, their strength, their claws and fangs. They were proud of their weapons. The human had used none. His only weapon had been his mind and its dominion over the frailties of his own body. His weapon was the concept of time itself. It was so undignified, Kalen finally managed to say, his voice a strained rasp. For both of them, no honor, no struggle, just decay. Verex was silent for a long time, his ancient eyes fixed on the tally mark on the human's arm. He saw it not as a score, but as a data point, a log entry. He saw the methodical butchering that the human was now beginning, the careful, practiced way he began to harvest the meat and hide, wasting nothing. He saw the entire 6-day ordeal not as a contest, but as a formula, an equation that had been set in motion the moment the human had decided on his target. An equation that had only one possible outcome, the other apex predators on proving ground 7 hunted. They tested their might against their prey. It was a gamble, a contest of abilities. The human had not gambled, he had not contested, he had simply enacted a process. Verex finally turned his gaze from the screen and looked at Kalen, his expression more serious than Kalen had ever seen it. "You are wrong, young one. You see a lack of honor because you are looking for a display of power. You did not see what I saw," Kalen asked, confused. "What did you?" "Saw a creature that has turned the entire universe into its weapon. It uses the heat of suns, the passage of hours, the chemistry of exhaustion, and the biology of its prey against it. We strike. That is a moment. What this human does, it is a condition. It is a state of being. He did not chase that animal to test himself against it." Verex paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the silent cockpit. "That wasn't a hunt. That wasn't sport." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near-inaudible, horrified whisper. "That was inevitable." Implications of that single word bloomed in the space between them. If a Xylan failed a hunt, they were merely unsuccessful. They would try again. But what did it mean to be a predator for whom failure was not a possibility, merely a delay in the outcome? What did it mean to face a creature that could decide you were going to die, and then simply wait until you did? They hovered there for another hour, watching the human work. He was a creature of immense, terrifying patience. He was not a warrior. He was a reaper. And Kalen, for the first time in his proud, predatory life, felt a cold, primal tremor of fear. Not for himself, but for a galaxy that was about to learn the true nature of the quiet, soft-skinned bipeds who had just been invited to the Apex trials. They had been invited to be judged. But Kalen had the chilling realization that it was they, the Xylans, the self-proclaimed apex predators who had just been measured and found wanting. They were fast. They were strong. But the human was relentless. And in a universe of finite energy and infinite time, what other quality truly mattered? Verex finally broke the silence. Transmit a report to command. What? What is the substance of the report, Elder? Kalen asked, his own voice sounding small and fragile. Verex looked at the human below, who was now carefully packing cuts of meat for the long walk back to the outpost. He looked like a simple forager, a harmless scavenger. The deception was perfect. The substance, Verex said grimly, is a re-evaluation, a complete re-evaluation of the classification persistence hunter, and a recommendation. Category 1, Kalen's blood ran cold. Category 1 was reserved for threats of an existential nature, planet killers, uncontrollable biological agents, things that didn't just win fights but changed the rules of existence itself. A recommendation, Verex continued, his voice like the grinding of stones, for caution. Extreme caution. We have prided ourselves on the perfect strike. We have just witnessed a species that has perfected the art of the perfect, unbreakable promise. The promise of an end. He looked at Kalen, his multifaceted eyes seeming to see into his very soul. And we have no defense against it.